This video will be about metaphoric criticism. For the information used in this video, I cite Rhetorical Criticism, Exploration and Practice by Sonia K. Foss, the 5th edition. Critics follow a four-step process when using the metaphoric method of criticism. The first step is selecting an artifact. The second step is analyzing the artifact. The third step, formulating a research question. And the fourth step, writing the essay. This video will show you how to perform step 2, analyzing the artifact. The first step in metaphoric criticism is choosing an artifact. Once you've chosen an artifact that indeed has metaphors, you will analyze your artifact in 4 steps. The 4 steps are listed here. Let's begin. Step 1. Examining the artifact as a whole. You want to be very familiar with the text or elements of your artifact. This means you want to be very aware of the context for your artifact. Your question is probably, what is context? So, context can be things like setting, occasion, audience, and redditor. Also, keep in mind that the meaning of most metaphors must be reconstructed using clues from context. So what does this mean? This means you must consider your context. Do not disregard its importance for the meaning of the metaphors. Here I have provided some context information for my artifact, which is Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. The setting for this speech was a Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The occasion was a March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. The audience was majority civil rights marchers, and the redditor, of course, was civil rights movement leader Martin Luther King Jr. Context can also be found in other places, like in the rhetoric that existed or occurred with the artifact. An example is of the report to the American people on civil rights given by President John F. Kennedy in June 1963, 2 months prior to MLK's I Have a Dream speech. Context can also be found in the audience reactions of the artifact. New York Times at the Times reported that MLK ignited the crowd with his I Have a Dream speech. Also, context can be found in the historical treatments of an artifact. This means, how has history treated and viewed this artifact throughout time? Well, we all know that MLK's I Have a Dream speech is one of his most memorable and studied speeches. It heavily impacted the civil rights movement. And 1 year later, MLK won a Nobel Prize for his civil rights leadership. This is an excerpt from my artifact. 50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. I will show you how to do step 2, isolating the metaphors with this excerpt. In red are the metaphors that MLK used. The first, in whose symbolic shadow we stand. The second, a great beacon light of hope. The third, seared in the flames of withering injustice. The fourth, daybreak. And the fifth, long night of their captivity. For 4 out of 5 of these metaphors, MLK has provided us both the tenors and vehicles of the metaphors. To explain the complex concept of hope, MLK has used a beacon of light. To explain injustice, MLK describes it as flames. To explain the significance of the Emancipation Proclamation, MLK refers to it as daybreak for the slaves at the time. And to explain the complexity of the concept of captivity, MLK refers to it as a long night. In some cases, both aspects of a metaphor are not present. Like when MLK says, "In whose symbolic shadow we stand," the vehicle, a symbolic shadow, is only present. There is an implied tenor of history, which is Abraham Lincoln and past civil rights struggles. With metaphoric criticism, you are also able to analyze non-discursive artifacts. A non-discursive artifact is something visual like an advertisement or image. There are 3 types of visual metaphors: substitution, fusion, and juxtaposition. With metaphors using substitution, only one, the tenor or the vehicle, are present. Like in the first photo here, depicted is our ecosystem, the tenor, which replaces a Jenga game, the vehicle. In the other photo, a broken column, the vehicle, replaces Frida Kahlo's broken spine, the tenor. For visual metaphors that use fusion, attributes of both the tenor and vehicle are present. Like in the first photo of light beer in a light bulb, or in the second photo of an advertisement that says, "An unwashed vegetable can become a deadly weapon," depicts an artichoke as a grenade. For visual metaphors using juxtaposition, the tenor and vehicle are put aside each other, separately within the same visual space. Like the photo of an eggplant with a pencil tip, that is an advertisement for colored pencils. Or of the photo below it that says "Words kill wars," depicts a gun with its barrel being a megaphone. Next to these 2 photos is a World Wildlife Fund advertisement. It depicts an open ocean and a shark fin, captioned "horrifying." Next to that is that same open ocean with no shark at all, captioned "more horrifying." You can now move on to step 3, sorting the metaphors. You want to group together your discovered metaphors and look for a pattern. According to Foss, you want to group the metaphors according to either vehicle or tenor, depending on your interest and what led you to that artifact in the first place. Keep in mind that the main tenors and vehicles used in the artifact serve as an index to how the redditor sees the world. So here I have sorted the metaphors for my excerpt. I have grouped by tenors, which are hope, injustice, Emancipation Proclamation, and captivity. Taking context into consideration and what MLK advocated for, these can be linked to other tenors such as African Americans, the Constitution, and the United States. This brings us to our last step, step 4, discovering an explanation for the artifact. In this step, you will analyze your groups of metaphors for an explanation for your artifact. You will ask yourself, what do these metaphors mean? What are these metaphors really trying to say? A good clue to know is that frequency and intensity help show significance. So, if a type of tenor or vehicle is repeatedly used, that shows frequency. And if a complex or unusual vehicle is used, that shows intensity. Here, I provide for you what an explanation might involve. It might involve a rhetoric's portrayal of topics through vehicles. In my artifact, MLK portrays intense topics through intense vehicles. Disclosure and concealment of certain aspects also help with explanation. So in mine, MLK focuses on change and progression. He does mention past history, yet all this past history mentioned involves change and progression. Attitudes and values of metaphors help with explanation too. In MLK's I Have a Dream speech, attitudes and values such as progressiveness, acceptance, and advocacy are shown throughout the speech. The audience's reactions of the metaphors also help with explanation. So with the audience of MLK's I Have a Dream speech, they are forced to recollect of past civil history and link it to the civil rights movement of the time. Also, metaphor shapes the redditor's identity. So in MLK's case, it reinforces his civil rights movement leadership, advocacy, and influence through this speech. We have come to the end of our video, and that means you have learned how to analyze an artifact using metaphoric criticism. Thank you for sticking through with me.